Today we're discussing the age of a continuous connection with our facilitator, Marcia Williams. She's a technology executive and a board member on many publicly held companies. Welcome, Marcia.
Thanks. Glad to be here, Gene.
So I want to go back to the beginning because this is a brand new theme for us, the age of continuous connection. Where did this come from and why are we talking about this?
Well, as industry moves forward, one of the challenges that everyone's facing today is how do you create that more personalized experience between the customer and the company? And that's what this panel is all about. It's about creating a deeper and more connected customer relationship and then how that can be curated over time. And the genesis of this project was actually an article in Harvard Business Review, HBR, in the recent May-June edition called The Age of Continuous Connection by the well-known team of Nikolai Siglico and Christian Terwish. And they're trying to remove some of the barriers that have traditionally hampered companies from having very direct one-on-one relationships with their customers.
So let's start with our first theme number one, which is, this is really just asking, what are your initial thoughts regarding continuous connection? So what were you hoping to find or collate here from your panel?
Before we dive into the details and the intrinsic values, within this article and this concept, we wanted our panelists to really kind of step back and say, okay, read the article, but then from a very high level, are you as intrigued by this as we are? Do you believe that this truly is the way that customer service and market segmentation and all that is going to go in the future? Or conversely, is this just another one of the latest fads that we can talk about for a few months? So, we really didn't want them to dig into the depths of it yet. We wanted them to, from an overall perspective, say, does this resonate with you?
So part of the Do We All Think is really awesome is you assembling a crackerjack panel of diverse experts. So tell us about this panel that you assembled to have this very highbrow conversation.
So what we have is an incredibly impressive group of business, marketing, and technology leaders from around the globe. And we have Hong Kong, Denmark, India, the Russian Federation, Netherlands, Austria, United Arab Emirates, Canada, and of course the U.S. This is probably the most globally diverse panel that I've seen in a long time on the current platform. And at the same time, the upper echelons of these businesses, people with great amount of executive experience, all contributing to their perspectives on this topic.
So I love that you're going to break this down into 4 interesting key elements here today. So tell us about this executive summary and what we're going to be getting into specifically.
Well, overall, the panelists resoundingly agreed with the concept of continuous customer connection, and they furthered that to kind of say they believe that new opportunities are available right now for companies that proactively deliver on customer needs, provided they do so in what they've termed a frictionless and effortless manner for the customer. Mm-hmm. And so what we're going to talk about is sort of the 4 conclusions around that, and, those range from it has to be implemented in a very permissive and personalized approach to companies, they need to humanize this connection a little bit. We're also going to talk briefly about some of the things you don't want to do or the mistakes that have been made in the past and you don't want to remake. And then ultimately, in our last point, we're going to look at the crystal ball and say, okay, so if the trajectory of this concept continues, where are we going to end up?
So let's jump into key point number 1 then, which really deals with being personalized and being permissive. So what does that mean, permissive? What do you mean?
Well, the first, an absolute ground zero for this type of concept was that the customers need to be engaged and give their permission for you to try and establish this type of relationship with them. So, it must be presented with a very personalized and permissive approach. But, as pointed out by Anvisha, at the same time, it needs to be timely, relevant, and value-added. And Suprika and Anthony just kind of, jump on board with that concept of needing to be sure that it's a personal and not overbearing and permissive approach.
So now we get into key point number 2, which is they want it to be humanized and they want it to be authentic. So what does that mean and how valuable is that?
Well, this key point hones in on the unique attributes of the approach, which really rely on being proactive, authentic, and having this exceptional execution. Christine points out that the proactive nature of this approach means that if you don't focus on being proactive by the simple definition of the term, your competitors may cross that finish line while you're still waiting for the customer to come to you. Supra touches on the need to bring authenticity and probably a more genuine human approach. And Joseph then speaks to the attributes of, exceptional execution. So all of those things, you really have to have all of those components in order to play in this, realm of continuous customer connection.
And then as you get into key point number 3, what were you guys discussing here?
Our third key point really reflects on attempts to create a more continuous connection and how easily companies can stumble if they don't execute on all those facets of the customer experience that we talked about in the last point. And Supra does a great job here of pointing to the need for a well-planned approach. I mean, this is not a shotgun, approach to something. You need to think it through, and then that's furthered by Anthony's comments around mindful interactions. And then last but not least, Christine takes it a step further and says, beware everyone, this is not continuous selling. Rather, this is about a continuous customer connection. So don't confuse the two, because you will quickly fall into that category of companies who've stumbled when they've tried to accomplish this.
And then your final key point here is key point number 4, which continues on this continuous connection and the value of delivering to individual customer needs. So tell us about that.
Well, this was really interesting. Our panelists sort of projected this strategy out a few years, and they hypothesized that the practice of segmenting markets into buckets of common dimensions, but they actually felt that that's ultimately going to be replaced by customized offerings aimed specifically at a single customer, or, if you will, a market segment of one. And that kind of, tilts everything we've learned about marketing in general on its side. And then, and Visha and Jeffrey also took it one step further, and they said, okay, there are going to be inherent challenges in if you do have a market segment of one and you're successful at marketing to that individual and making a relationship with them. How do you differentiate at that point? Or how does anyone else get, a sliver of your bandwidth so that they can try and present their product to you?
Exactly. Let's talk about these top 3 experts here, the people that contributed the most to the conversation.
I'm glad the current bot was able to determine our quote-unquote top 3, because I wouldn't have been able to differentiate that. The 3 that it did pick were Christine, who is a brand marketing executive with years of experience for brands that we all recognize, like Lego, Kellogg, Tropicana, Olive Garden. Rob has spent many years as an executive in the financial services area. Now he's president of a consulting firm that really drives advancements in financial services. And then lastly, Anthony is CEO of a medical device company, and his expertise is really around strategic planning and execution and helping companies embrace some of these new paths that they need to go down in order to remain current and relevant.
So Michelle read this article. She was inspired by it. She created this whole panel, which is absolutely amazing. So it started a conversation. That conversation led to another conversation. And that conversation we're going to cover in theme number 2. What is the next conversation?
Within the article, there are 4 specific connected strategies that you can use with different customers at different times. And the first one is called Respond to Desire. So we're going to take a deep dive on Respond to Desire strategy, look at the companies who excel at doing that. What is it that makes them excel? What have they learned over time? And then what are some tips that companies that want to start down this path can sort of emulate and maybe not have to reinvent the wheel?
I can't wait for that conversation, Marcia. Thank you for walking us through this really fascinating conversation today. I look forward to our next conversation as well.
Thanks, Gene. We'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks.
It's Marcia Williams. She's a technology executive and a board member on several different technology organizations. And Marcia, we will talk again.
Thanks, Gene.